welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of South Carolina.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick! Plays it in at the buzzer! That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live. It's Quarter Zip Wednesday. It's January the 31st, and South Carolina men's basketball is 18-3, 6-2 in the Southeastern Conference, and fresh off a 63-59 upset of number 5 Tennessee on Rocky Flop at a sold-out Thompson Bowling Arena. Last night, the Gamecocks go in, and folks, they won that game with defense and guts. And sometimes guts is enough. And that was the case last night, along with timely three-point shooting in the second half. In the second half, the Gamecocks only made, let me make sure that's right, 8 field goals. 8 made field goals. 6 of them were from three-point range. The Gamecocks were 6 of 16, okay, but they were 11 of 12 from the free throw line. And really, it's Talon Cooper and Miles Studi. Those guys. Cooper, 18 points, 6 of 10 from the field, 4 of 5 from downtown, 2 of 2 from the free throw line. And Miles Studi, in his first game back, 13 points on 3 for 4 from the field, 3 for 3 from downtown, 4 for 4 from the free throw line. He hit the clinchers at the end. Gamecocks really win this game in spite of B.J. Mack, who was brilliant from the free throw line. Okay, Mack, 7 for 8 from the free throw line, but just 4 of 15 from the field and 1 of 8 from 3. And Meechie Johnson, 3 points, 1 of 8 and 1 for 5. But Meechie Johnson just continued to make plays, to distribute the basketball, and to do what he had to do in that game for South Carolina to get the win. Meechie Johnson, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, no turnovers. Okay, Talon Cooper had 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 turnovers. And the Gamecocks take care of the basketball. They only turn it over 10 times. And they pull off their second top 6 upset in the last week. 79-62 over Kentucky and 63-59 over Tennessee. We will get into that, as well as the hire of Joe DeCamillis as associate head coach and special teams coordinator. He will be introduced tomorrow at 10:45 with head coach Shane Beamer. That will be on Gamecocks online.com, and I'm sure on the YouTube page you'll be able to watch. We'll get into all of that with Jordan Kaye from Go Gamecocks and thestate.com. And then in the second half of the show, we will be joined by Cory Diaz, who, to my knowledge, is the only beat writer to cover both Dawn Staley and Kim Mulkey. Cory was at the Greenville News, now the beat writer for the Daily Advertiser in Lafayette, Louisiana, which I have had the privilege of passing through. So we have got a great show. Jump in the Nana's Porch chat box. We'll get to your questions for Jordan and Cory. Let's go ahead and bring him in right now from the state and GoGamecocks.com, back for his second appearance on the pod, first on YouTube, Jordan Kaye from Go Gamecocks and the state. And Jordan, I thought, honestly, when I planned this show, we would talk about Joe DeCamillis,
yeah,
the NFL playoffs, the Super Bowl, Deebo Samuel, Javon Kinlaw getting the opportunity to get a Super Bowl ring, and then the quarter zip goes to Rocky Flop last night, and all they do is hold Tennessee to about 30 points below their season average.
Yeah.
Just gut it out. Welcome in. Welcome home.
Thank you.
To the show.
Wow.
And I mean, that is the story of the day. So just your thoughts on the upset win last night.
Yeah, that was one of those real like statement wins. You know, I think the Kentucky one, for a lot of people, that was the moment where they said, okay, this team is real, they're legit. But that Kentucky game though, I mean, South Carolina shot the ball as well as you could have shot the ball. Kentucky looked scared. It looked like they had never faced a guy who was over about 6'4". And it was just kind of one of those, you know, not a fluke game, but one of those like blowouts where you're like, all right, what did that mean? This Tennessee game was everything you could have ever wanted as a South Carolina fan. It was the perfect game in terms of mucking it up. Like I remember Calipari said after the Kentucky game, oh, South Carolina mucked it up. Some people can look at that as a good thing. Some may be like, what does that mean? Is that a backhanded compliment? No, they muck games up because they're so physical on defense. They're so fast on defense. They're getting over picks. They're making sure their switches are perfect. They're calling out transition stuff. Goes on. And I mean, that's what they do. They muck games up. I went on today. I was looking at the KenPom rankings. I can't believe they're only 48th in adjusted defense. Like, I got to go back and kind of look at their first and second month. I remember they gave up a lot of points to Clemson. They gave up a lot of points to Alabama. Those might be, you know, some of the outliers that are hurting their metrics a little bit. But man, they're playing like a top 10 defense in the country right now. The way they are forcing these really good teams into bad shots, and just watch how many times that these great teams, number 6 Kentucky, number 5 Tennessee, are like getting into like the last 3 seconds of a shot clock, having to get a shot up. I mean, they can't get an open look, and that's a testament to South Carolina more than anything else.
And conversely, they're forcing Kentucky and Tennessee to play half-court defense for 25 to 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, they offensive rebound, so sometimes you have to play great half-court defense for 55 or 85 or 89 seconds when they're putting up, you know, these end of shot clock shots. I mean, so Bart Torvik, who is another analytics guy, he breaks it down per 100 possessions, which is the way they do it in the NBA. Yeah. And that's why I like it. And so if you look at South Carolina, they're giving up in their last 10 games 92.3 points per game per 100 possessions. Okay.
Wow.
But there's not 100 possessions in a South Carolina basketball game for each team, right? Like it's not the NBA. It's not 48 minutes. It's 40 minutes. And South Carolina is right now third in the SEC in adjusted defensive efficiency.
Yeah.
It's okay for them to be 11th, okay, offensively because of the pace of play, right?
Yeah.
Like Lamont Paris does not have 10 gazelles that he can press and run up and down the floor and jack up threes early in the shot clock like Kentucky, who was scoring 92 points per game, or even Rick Barnes, 89.5 points per game. I said it off the open. They won that game last night with defense and guts and timely three-point shooting. You look at the second half. How many teams win a game when they only make 8 field goals on the road in the second half against a top 5 opponent?
Yeah.
Not often. 6 for 16 from 3 and 11 of 12 from the free throw line. But Tennessee, outside of Connect, they could not score. And Dalton Connect, who's leading the SEC in scoring, he had to try to put them on his back, but he had 25 points on 24 field goal attempts, which I think you will live with, right?
And so many of those threes, I mean, I give them credit for hitting them, but all they did was make the score look closer at the end.
The last 2 were prayers, basically.
Incredible shots. Like you got to give him credit because you know he practices those. But yes, they didn't really affect the outcome much.
So for South Carolina, I think you have to look at the straw that stirs the drink. The leader of this team is Talon Cooper. He continues his string of magnificent games. 18 points, 6 of 10 from the field, 4 of 5 from 3, 2 of 2 from downtown. And then the return of Miles Studi, who was clutch.
Those free throws were,
I
mean, ice in your veins when you're hitting those.
13 points, 3 for 3 from downtown, and 4 for 4 from the free throw line. He only missed 1 bucket all night. And to knock down, and he only played 20 minutes.
Yeah.
To go to the free throw line after being out for 2 weeks on the road at Tennessee. I mean, it's not like he's a 90% free throw shooter like Jacoby Wright either.
Yeah.
But for him to knock those shots down.
And chirp at the Tennessee.
Oh, yeah. They let him know about it.
Yeah, that's an extra level of confidence.
So I watched the Rick Barnes post game, as well as Lamont Paris, who, by the way, said last week, if you like us, you like us. If you don't, you'll pay the price. And
what a hell of a quote. Hell of a quote.
And clearly the AP and the coaches poll did not believe South Carolina was worthy of a top 25 ranking, even though they were 17-3, 5-2. They beat the brakes off Kentucky.
Yeah.
Who was 6th. Okay. Bart Torvik, prior to last night's game, had South Carolina with about a 62% chance of making the NCAA tournament. After the game, 93.5% chance of making the tournament.
Wow.
I mean, we're still not halfway through the SEC schedule. We will be on Saturday.
Yeah.
But this team is ahead of schedule. 18-3, 6-2, which, by the way, is good for number 2 in the league.
Yep.
Show me another Power 5 league that a team is 18-3 and ranked second in their league, and they're not in the top 25.
I will say, like, here's my argument against that. I think, like, I'm a big, like, metrics guy when it comes to the NCAA tournament, because I've been around people who do brackets all the time, and they legitimately do not need to watch a second of college basketball. Like, it's like Billy Bean and Moneyball. They do not need to go watch the games. It is all about the metrics. They are looking at your numbers. They're looking at the Torvik. They're looking at KenPom. They're looking at your net. They're looking at your RPI. Like, it's all it is. And South Carolina doesn't have very good numbers, and that's just the reality of it. The reason they don't have very good numbers is because they played, like, they did not challenge themselves in the non-conference. They played DePaul, Grand Canyon. Notre Dame was just assigned to them, so that doesn't count. Clemson, they're going to play every year. So then, other than that, their best game is Grand Canyon, like on a random, like, Thanksgiving, like, Saturday at like 10 p.m. So that's your best game.
A quad 1 win right now.
No, it is, but they didn't know that. They didn't know it was a quad 1 win. Like, that's not one of those where you're like, oh man, we hope DePaul jumps into a quad 3. And so when I see that, to me, that signifies a coach that was not expecting to get to the NCAA tournament, not even expecting to be on the bubble of the NCAA tournament. Because if you're expecting to be on the bubble of the NCAA tournament, you're going to make sure that you have a couple games in there that are really going to bolster your resume and make it so, hey, we're not on the wrong side of the bubble, like Clemson last year. And so this signified a coach in Lamont Paris who was excited about his team, thought they were going to have momentum from a terrible first season, but was not thinking they were going to be sniffing the bubble. And right now, I think, this is the price you pay with a great season is people are mad about the AP poll. And the problem is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If they keep winning, their metrics are going to even out. Their metrics even out every time. I mean, they've jumped like 10 spots in KenPom in like a night because they beat Tennessee. Their metrics are going to get better. Their schedule has already, once it was like before the conference play started, it was in like the high 200s, and now it's at 108. It gets itself better. If you keep winning, you're not on the bubble. The only time this comes into play is if you're in the bubble. That's why when Joe Lunardi was putting out his bracket a couple of weeks ago, like South Carolina was, they'd only lost 2 or 3 games and they're right on the bubble. It's because the schedule doesn't look good. But you can correct that if you just keep winning. It doesn't matter. At that point, all you're going to be complaining about is maybe the seed. And who cares? Who cares at that point? Hell, when they made the Final Four, they weren't a high seed. It doesn't matter. You're all good at it. So that's kind of my thing when it comes to that. The polls I don't care about. Even the polls are people looking at rankings. The only time that it would really matter is if, like, they lost Kentucky and they lost to Tennessee and they're on the bubble. Then you're going to have people kind of being like, oh, what? Why aren't they in the tournament? Or why aren't they higher seed? And it's like, well, because I don't think they thought they were going to be on the bubble.
Well, I mean, I agree.
With that or not.
I don't think they thought they would be.
Yeah. No, okay.
I thought it was good scheduling because, to me,
correct. It was good.
When practice started, my expectation was have a winning season.
Yep.
Get to the NIT and win some games. Anything.
And that's what the schedule was set up for. It was to build confidence. It was to build confidence and build wins. And it worked to perfection. I mean, I can't blame it at all. It's amazing.
But now,
he knows his team.
They are 4-2 in quad 1 games. They are 3-0 in quad 2 games. And the only bad loss they have is the Georgia game, which, by the way, could have catapulted this team.
Yes.
Because Lamont Paris said the next 2 games, they went back to training camp, fundamental practices to sharpen the saw, to work on rebounding, to work on defense, to work on fundamentals, finishing plays, finishing possessions. And it's worked because you look at Tennessee, and look, if you're going to upset a top 5 team on the road, they're not going to have a great shooting night, okay? But really, nobody does. Tennessee missed layups. Rick Barnes said, hey, I guarantee you we met every one of our defensive objectives in this game. Hold them under 69 points, which they did, 63, right?
Yep.
But Tennessee missed shots at the rim. But guess what? That's what South Carolina does to people with that pack line defense and the physicality of guys like Josh Gray, who had another great game last night, 6 points, 2 for 4 from the field. Amazingly, 2 for 2 from the free throw line, 7 rebounds, okay, in 14 minutes, and he was +6. BJ Mack did not have a good game. South Carolina won in spite of the fact he and Meechie Johnson combined to go 2 for 13 from 3, and Meechie just 1 for 8, but he did have 6 assists, including some great penetrations, getting both feet in the lane and kicking it to the open shooter. Cooper and Studi and those guys knocked down shots. Mac just 4 for 15, 1 of 8 from 3, but 7 for 8.
Man, do you ever sometimes I
think he
watch
shoots too many threes.
Yeah, that's what I was
I
gonna
think
say.
he shoots too many.
It's crazy when they go in. I'm partly almost like always surprised because but I think that's the way South Carolina's offense is built, to where almost every guy on the floor is able to shoot threes. And I saw an article today, and it kind of got me thinking, like, this team reminds me of those was like 2010 through 2015 Wisconsin teams. And Lamont Paris is a Bo Ryan disciple, former Wisconsin assistant. And
pack line defense, movers and blockers, moving the ball side to side and making
Wisconsin runs like this like little known offense called the swing. Basically, the point is you're always moving without the ball, and your big men can come up to the perimeter and they have to be able to shoot threes. And every time he shoots, it's just kind of another thing. Frank Kaminsky, Sam Decker, all those guys. And so, every time he shoots, it kind of shows, that team and then the future teams that are scouting him, hey, this guy will take it. So you've got to make sure you're honest with him. But yeah, I mean, a lot of similarities to those Wisconsin teams, and just hard-nosed defense, and make sure that, you're good enough on offense.
So Gamecocks moved to number 39 in the net. They moved to a 6th seed in the latest rendition of Joe Lenardi's bracketology. And they're ahead of schedule. Like, I thought, hey, you need to win that Georgia game on the road, which they still do, because it's a top, I guess quad 2 on the road is top 75. So it'll still. On
the road, yeah.
Yeah. So Georgia currently number 78 in the net.
Yeah.
Okay. So they really need to win that one. I mean,
it'd be another quad 3 loss. Yeah.
Right. If you win that one, you're definitely going to be ranked at 19-3, 7-2. There's no doubt about it after the top 5 win. Okay. Then you've got Ole Miss, who's 53 in the net.
Mm-hmm.
Vanderbilt's just going to kill you regardless. I mean, if you beat them by anything less than 35 points, that's going to kill you, because they're 238.
I know.
And then at Auburn, number 8 in the net. But
you can lose that one.
Top 50 in the net. A&M's top 50 in the net. LSU, I think, is in the top 60, 65, 75. Mississippi State, you got the 2 games against Ole Miss. And so there's a lot out there for this team. So with now 2 marquee wins, right, like signature wins, put on your bracketology cap. What's the SEC record for South Carolina to be a lock to make the tournament?
Trying to think. I think they have to win 6 more games and don't lose to Vanderbilt, and you're in.
So 12 and 6.
Correct. 12 and 6. That would include the SEC tournament. 12 and or no, not even. Don't count the SEC tournament. 12 and 6. Don't lose to Vanderbilt. You're in. Because the SEC is so good this year that, you know, if you win a couple of these games, most of them are so, you know, really good for your metrics. Like you said, Florida's really good. Ole Miss is kind of in the same spot that South Carolina is. Fantastic record, terrible schedule. The metrics don't really like them a whole lot. Georgia, again, you're getting them on the road, so it's not the worst loss in the world. Especially because if Georgia were to beat South Carolina, it would probably bump Georgia up, and that would be a quad 2 win. Other than that, I mean, there's a lot of these games where it's not gonna hurt you one way or the other. Vanderbilt's the one, like you're saying, that would be that black stain on the back of your resume. But other than that, I mean, I think win 6 more is a realistic goal. What do you think? What's your bracketology cap? Throw that on. Let's hear it.
I think 10 and 8 and at least 1 win in the tournament they're in. They're probably a low seed.
You even have lower expectations than me, or a lower floor. Wow. Okay.
But at this point, anything over that, every win over that increases the seed. Like,
correct.
Would you want to be a 6 seed? Absolutely. Versus an 8 or 9, right? 8 or 9 is the worst seed because then you're playing a 1, right? Unless
even a 7, you're playing a 2 in the next round, and a 10 is usually pretty Power 5 team.
But that was South Carolina's last road to the Final Four. They were
That's true. That's true.
They beat Marquette to 7. Then they upset Duke with Jason Tatum and about 4 other, lottery picks.
Yeah,
those guys were 18, just like Kentucky probably has 4 or 5 lottery picks.
100%.
Right, and so yeah. All right, so let's switch gears here. Tomorrow at 10:45, and it became official on Monday, unofficial. Yep. The news broke on Saturday. Shane Beamer replacing Pete Lembo with Joe DeCamillis, a NFL special teams guru and veteran of over 30 years. He's got a very unique tie to the university. The son-in-law of former Gamecock, Dan Reeves, Hall of Fame, Dallas Cowboy, Hall of Famer as a head coach. Your thoughts on the hire of Joe DeCamillis replacing Pete Lembo, who gets a head coaching job at Buffalo?
This dude is a unicorn. Like, I had heard his name just, watching the NFL over the years. Oh, Joe DeCamillis, I remember him on the Broncos team that won the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning. I don't even know if I had ever heard his name on the Rams. I just didn't I don't know that I fully knew this type of person existed, where you've been a special teams coach for 30 years. It seems unbelievable to me that will be, something replicated. I know John Fossil is with the Cowboys right now, and that's a kind of a guy who's been a special teams coach for forever and ever. But first of all, those dudes are few and far between. And then think of how rare it would be for one of those guys to then become available and willing to go to college. This is more than a home run for Shane Beamer. I think he called it a grand slam, and man, it's really hard to argue with it. We know how much he stresses special teams in the program. We know how much he loved Beamer ball and, making sure that football is really about all three phases of the game. And you could not have found a better guy in Joe DeCamillis. And the other thing I think is kind of lost too is, we had talked about it the last time of, okay, Beamer has a lot of options here. He could do it himself, hire another assistant. He could go grab a guy from college and just kind of pay him a little less, and maybe they have some more money for other options. And he can also, have his hand in it. What I think I didn't think about is in Pete Lembo, he didn't just lose a special teams coordinator. He lost like a consigliere. Like he lost his right-hand man, a guy who he can go through every situation with and say, hey, here's how did you do this when you were at, Lehigh? How did you do this? What are your thoughts on this? Now he's got that. He's got a guy who doesn't have head coaching experience, but as you said with Dan Reeves, he comes from the head coaching, a tree kind of, and he's been with NFL teams since like the Reagan administration. He knows it. I mean, he's seen every situation there is. He is going to have input, and it doesn't matter that it's not on a college level. A lot of these NFL guys, Dow Loggins being one of them, it's not too hard to recruit when you're coming into an NFL job. It's about, do you want to recruit? Because if you want to recruit, all you got to do is show them your 2 Super Bowl rings, and the recruiting becomes pretty easy. And so, I think the biggest thing for Beamer is now he's got a guy who he can run things by, who he can walk down the hall and say, Joe, this is going on. Anything like this ever happened to you, what would you do? Boom. That's what Shane Beamer gained in Joe DeCamillis. The special teams part to me is just an added benefit. But as long as Shane Beamer's your head coach, you could have me or you in there, and he would probably right the ship on whatever the punting or kicking issues were.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. I mean, I didn't know if it'd be possible to get a better special teams coordinator than Pete Lembo, but with Joe DeCamillis, I mean, he's 2 Super Bowl rings. He was with the Falcons in their first Super Bowl.
Yeah.
2 stints with Denver, 2 stints with Jacksonville, 10 years in Atlanta with Dan Reeves, with the Dallas Cowboys. He's actually in the practice facility when the wind blew it in during training camp or OT.
Oh, really?
And he broke his neck. And one of their other assistant coaches was permanently paralyzed. He had to have his cervical spine fused and was back in practice like 10 days later. But what I do like is, just like Dow Loggins, he's seen college football. He knows it's not 8 o'clock a.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. That's okay. He was at Texas. He was special assistant. He oversaw their special teams, but he also was in charge of in-game management, time and score situations, timeout management, not getting delay of games. And so he's seen how college practices work. He's seen the workload. And I think that is a great bonus with that guy, instead of it being, oh, well, shoot, we only really got about 14 hours per week to do this stuff.
Yeah. That's a good point of mentioning the Texas stop. I think it's kind of one of those things that gets overshadowed a little bit when you look at the rest of his resume. But you're right. I mean, I covered Arizona State when Herm Edwards was there, and Marvin Lewis kind of had the exact same role. Marvin Lewis came to ASU and was the special assistant to the head coach. And it seems like a blip on his resume when you're looking at everything else, but he did a lot of stuff. He did a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And not only that, he was in the building quite often. He didn't want to recruit, but he said, hey, I'll come into the office at 5 a.m. I'll leave whenever you want. I'll look over tape. I'll help you out. And you're right, just being around it for an entire year, especially at a program like Texas this year, that beat Alabama, goes to the playoff, has about as long of a season as you can have in college football, and he saw it all. You're right. That's a good point.
Awesome. Well, Jordan, we'll end it there. I can't thank you enough for jumping on. Great stuff.
Thank you so much.
And can't wait to have you back on. You're doing great work there at the state. And,
appreciate it. Thank you, Keith.
All right. You take care, and we'll
have a great day.
Soon. Thanks. All right. So we would go from Jordan and welcome in Cory Diaz, who's been waiting patiently. I think he fell asleep. Sorry about that. Cory, when I asked you to come on, I had no idea the quarter zip would quarter zip Rick Barnes last night. And so we got a little bit more discussion on that. But, hey, man, how are things in Louisiana? How's the hot sauce out there?
Hot sauce is always great here. Appreciate you having me on, Keith. It's, and I watched a little bit of that men's basketball game last night too. I think combined 37-3. When was the last time the women's and men's team in South Carolina at this point in the year were combined for that kind of record? I know it's something fairly historic.
I mean, it'd probably be 2016 or 2017, right? When, Dawn was a number 1 seed. I can't remember. Maybe they only had one loss. That's the year. Or no, 2016 is the year they got beat in South Dakota in the Sweet 16 by Syracuse. They were the number 1 overall seed. Dawn wasn't very happy about having to go up there, and I think it may have rubbed off on the players. She was not happy with the selection committee. She felt like they should have been in Lexington that year. Instead, they got shipped to South Dakota, and she made her feelings known about it. I'll probably say that'd be the last time, because that's the last time the men's team was 18-3, was 2016. So probably so. So you were at
I've heard some tales about the Sioux Falls trip that year from people inside the program and out. So yeah, I don't. And what's funny is that, Dawn since then has scheduled with, South Dakota State, and they've played, in South Dakota since that trip. So maybe it's kind of water under the bridge now for her. But I've heard many tales about that trip to Sioux Falls that, you kind of hear those and you just go, okay, I can kind of understand why things shook out the way that they did that night.
Right. So I can't tell you how excited I am to have you on. I always wanted to get you on when you were with my hometown paper, the Greenville News. Growing up, my dad had a side gig as delivering the paper in Norris and Katichi, which is basically nowhere, a blip on the map. But you did a fantastic job with the Greenville News, and really appreciate you doing that. And so you are unique because, to my knowledge, you're the only beat writer to cover both Dawn Staley and Kim Mulkey, who, even though I am a notorious Kim Mulkey insulter, she is a Hall of Fame coach. She's certainly very flamboyant, that's for sure. And so what has that transition been like for you, covering Dawn Staley in South Carolina and then covering Kim Mulkey?
You might be surprised, Keith. I would say it's fairly similar because you're basically covering the two most recognizable women's college basketball coaches, depending on what day that is too and what's going on, right? You could say Dawn's at the top of that list, and other days you might would say Kim's at the top. Obviously, probably this past March and April, you would say maybe Kim's at the top because, LSU wins the national championship for the first time in its program history. But, Keith, honestly, I would say, being with Dawn in South Carolina, the last time they won the national championship a couple of years ago. It was a perfect stage setter for taking over, the LSU women's basketball beat here. And, no one knew last summer that, Kim and LSU were going to accomplish what they accomplished. They talked a lot last year, especially as the SEC schedule was winding down. We were getting closer and closer to the NCAA tournament. The talk was, we just want to win one more game than we won the season before. And the season before, they got upset, by Ohio State on their home floor in the second round. So the goal was to get to the Sweet 16. Now, the type of year that Angel Reese was having, I think right around that same time, the talking points were, well, let's get to the Sweet 16. But just from conversations and the feeling that I had within and around the program, they thought the Elite Eight was very much on the table. And depending on matchup, if they got a good matchup, Final Four was not out of the question. Now, obviously, going on to win the NCAA championship was not on the table at that point. But the way that the regional round went for them last year, it really set them up to get to the Final Four, because they matched up with Miami, in the Elite Eight, who had knocked off Indiana on their home floor in the second round. And so then Miami rolled into the Elite Eight there. And, if it hadn't have been for 2 missed free throws at the end of the Utah game in the Sweet 16, I mean, LSU gets beat in the Sweet 16. So, but this is a long-winded way to answer your question, that it's not, I think a lot of people not in these types of shoes, they assume that there's a lot of differences, but the work itself isn't very different. I would say it's almost nearly identical. And being able to be with Dawn in South Carolina when they won the championship in 22 was certainly a very good prerequisite for covering Kim and LSU last year when they won the title as well.
No doubt. So let's talk about the event, because that's what it was last Thursday, right? Like, that was the center of the college basketball world. ESPN College Game Day, 60 minutes leading up to tip-off. A sellout crowd at the Pete Maravich Center, a whiteout, and 6 national championships between them. And most Gamecock fans thought it'd be 3-3, but instead Mulkey and LSU, they did what they had to do, and they cut down the nets. But South Carolina, 5 new starters, okay, going into the season, nobody was talking about South Carolina like this. I'm sure not in Baton Rouge. LSU was the consensus pick to win the SEC. And then South Carolina goes to France and drops 100 on Notre Dame. And Malaysia Fulwiley, Ryan Rucco, the Eiffel Tower is shaking. Then they drop 111 on Maryland. LSU gets beat by Colorado to open the season. I mean, that still frame picture of Kim Mulkey is still the gift that keeps on giving. But South Carolina vaults to number 1. They've been there. They're the only undefeated team in the country. Just how off guard did they catch the SEC, and even in your neck of the woods? I mean, nobody was expecting this from this team.
Yeah, I would say, obviously you can look back at, the preseason polls, coming off the national championship, although LSU did lose some very vital pieces. The prediction was that they would, be sort of the flag barrier for the SEC this year, and obviously, challenge, South Carolina, because they've won a handful or so, in a row. So there's still a sense of you have to go through, the champion to be the champion, right? it's like I asked Kim, leading up to the South Carolina game last week, is that, do you feel like, a national championship closes the gap between what you guys are doing here at LSU versus what, Dawn accomplished already and continue to accomplish, at South Carolina? And, she didn't quite take the bait, but, she said it's almost like comparing apples and oranges, and the question that I had for South Carolina was, how well would Tahina Paopao find her role in this team? We all knew coming in out of the portal from Oregon that, she came to South Carolina, to Columbia, South Carolina, to do one thing, and that was to shoot the outside shot. Obviously, she had a lot of success, in Eugene doing that. But how could she work her skills into Dawn's system and make it, not only palatable, but efficient and successful? And we saw it from the tip. I mean, we saw it in the Notre Dame game in Paris. And that game, Keith, I remember sitting in my hotel room in Las Vegas because South Carolina was playing the first game of the season because they were so many hours ahead. First game of the women's college basketball season. Woke up that morning early, went down to the lobby, got me a little breakfast, came back up, turned on the TV, was ready to go, and I was blown away.
10 a.m. Pacific time.
Yeah, 10. It was 9 o'clock in Las Vegas.
And
And
11 o'clock Central, 12 Eastern. That's right.
Yeah, and so I remember watching the game and just watching them. Again. Notre Dame was obviously missing a couple of pieces, due to injury and what have you. Olivia Miles still not playing, but the way they were able to just completely dominate and suffocate what was then, and I still feel is a top 10 team in Notre Dame. It was impressive. And, I remember going to the T-Mobile Arena that afternoon for the LSU game. Although I will admit I did get there early because I wanted to see Juju Watkins play. They were playing in the first game that day as well. But anyway, I do remember getting to the arena, and especially along press row, a lot of the talk was about what South Carolina did to Notre Dame and how impressive they looked, with basically a brand new band in terms of starters, right? And so it raised some eyebrows here. Now, there was a lot of confidence in what LSU and who they were going to be, leading up to that game that night. And, they underperformed. They underwhelmed. In fact, I would say Colorado overwhelmed them, was far and away the more physical team. And it was not a look that I think a lot of the LSU supporters were expecting to see in the opener. Now, of course, that it shook them a little bit. It was clear wake-up call, and we've seen LSU do some much better things since that opening loss, but I still don't think we've seen this team play to its potential or capability yet. I think the South Carolina loss was the closest that we've seen, but yeah, I mean it's the way it has shaken out so far. It hasn't happened just here in the SEC. I mean, it's happened all over. I mean, there's been tons of upsets all season long, and we're in for a crazy March. I'm really excited about it because there could be multiple lower seeded teams that make what they would classify as deep runs in this tournament. Because I just think the parity along the sport right now is, we see it almost night in, night out. So it's going to make for a really exciting March. Now, the thing with the SEC is, Tennessee's obviously playing better now with Rakia Jackson back into the fold. Ole Miss seems to be catching its stride. I thought they were going to be a top 3 team in this league this year. They finally seem to have found themselves. Mississippi State is a sleeper. If South Carolina has an off night, in Greenville in a couple of weeks, they could find themselves on the losing end to one of these teams. I don't think it's a possibility. So, but credit to Dawn and her staff and the players. They've found a way to come together from the beginning And they've only allowed themselves to kind of hold on to that. And I think that's something that LSU is chasing right now.
I mean, look, that Colorado loss for LSU to open the season, I mean, they've been ranked as high as number 3 in the country. They did get beat last week. They're number 6. Even with, well, I mean, LSU dropping that game at Ole Miss after dropping the game at Auburn. And then I really think they let South Carolina catch them twice. I mean, they've already got 3 losses. I mean, South Carolina, I mean, you might as well, barring some catastrophic injuries, deliver the regular season trophy back to Columbia, which I didn't know would be the case. But before we get to that, let's get back to the game. Just from all the games you've been to, I mean, talk about that atmosphere, the whiteout, college game day, the lead in, and then the great start by LSU. Kind of reminded me of the UConn start with South Carolina a couple years ago. And I think in the Bahamas or the Virgin Islands in that game, UConn roared out and then South Carolina eventually came back. But just what was it like compared to the other games that you've attended? I have to think it was special, just like that UConn South Carolina game in 2020, 18,000 people. It was nuts in there.
Yeah, no, I mean, the atmosphere was, I guess as a member of the media, you're concerned coming into games like this, is it going to live up to the billing? And especially when we're talking more specifically, right, about women's college basketball. And obviously the trajectory is soaring right now, right? But you still need the product to mirror that, So, I mean, we had, I talked with, colleagues from a national level all the way down to, local LSU beat reporters and even some of my friends who cover South Carolina who were in town for the game. The concern from our vantage point was we just want it to be a good game.
Right.
Regardless of which team wins, we don't want South Carolina to come in and go up by 20. We don't want South Carolina to come in and LSU go up by 20. We want it to be a good game. We obviously got that, but there's almost become this interesting tradition at LSU when the weather's bad outside, the game, whatever's happening that night, ends up being tremendous. And the weather was not great. I know South Carolina, they had, a bit of a bumpy ride coming into town the day before. And so the weather had not been good basically all week long, raining almost the entire time, thunderstorms, lightning. And the student line to get into the building, I think, started forming at about, noon or 1 o'clock that afternoon.
Wow.
And again, didn't care that it was raining, didn't care that the weather was terrible. They wanted to be in there. And as soon as they opened the door, I mean, the students were running, to take their spot, in the student section. And they were amped from the moment they walked through the door. And you knew that just from an environment and an atmosphere perspective, that it was going to be awesome. It was going to be electric. And then the teams delivered. And I think at the end of the night, and, I think both Dawn and Kim said it after the game, South Carolina won on the scoreboard, but arguably the biggest winner was women's college basketball, because you had the prime time slot on the biggest sports network. You had College Game Day there, who did a tremendous job of showcasing not only the game itself, but also the other storylines that are happening around the country, because there's lots of really good ones. And the main event was appetizing. It filled you up, and it's games like that we need to continue to see. In terms of where I would rank it, when I was on the South Carolina beat, Tennessee came in and College Game Day was in town. Yeah. There was 19,000 people in that building. That atmosphere sticks with me to this day. It was electric in that building that day. The national championship game, anytime you're playing Caitlin Clark right now, no matter where you are, I think the atmosphere is going to be insane. So the national championship game this past April was probably the best atmosphere that I've ever been in. And
I sold my tickets.
You sold your tickets. You should have came, Keith. I mean, it's tremendous. It was a great time. The South Carolina UConn game for the national championship in 22 was really special, obviously, because Paige is from Minnesota. They played in Minneapolis. I mean, the atmosphere there was tremendous too. Even though UConn was basically almost a shell of itself, they had injuries and Paige wasn't 100% that night, but you did get, I remember writing a story leading up to that game. It was dream theater. That was what at the time, that was the matchup that every women's college basketball fan wanted. They wanted Dawn in South Carolina. They wanted Gino and UConn, and you get it for the biggest prize. I mean, you can't beat that stuff. And I think Thursday night was another case of that, right? It was Kim and LSU, the reigning, and I kind of hate the word defending, but the reigning national champions. You got Dawn in South Carolina, who had won it the year prior. So you got the previous 2 national championship winners. You got the 2 most recognizable women's college basketball coaches on the sideline. And obviously, look, and how they coach during the game, right, is always, discussed and debated. Who does it better? Who has the right way? Who does it the wrong way? What are they wearing? Why is that the right way? And why, it's so many things. But you had all the eyes of the sports world on it. I mean, Kirk Herbstreit's talking about the game. I mean, everybody, and that's why I say Thursday night was really important because there was a lot more at stake than an SEC regular season championship or NCAA tournament seeding. There was more at stake, and the sport and the game, the coaches, the players, they played their part.
I mean, no doubt about it, and it was just a phenomenal game. Both teams throwing haymakers. And look, as an old basketball coach who used to hear Mike Krzyzewski when I would go to Duke's clinic say, look, we're not the defending national championship. Okay, we don't have to defend that trophy. Nobody's coming to get it from us. Okay, we won it. We're the reigning national championship. We're not defending that. We're playing for another one, right? And I know that's how Dawn Staley feels about it. I know that's how Gino Auriemma feels about it. I know that's how Kim Mulkey feels about it. It's the pursuit, because as a coach, you're always looking forward. And this game was important. I go back, I still think, the college presidents and the conferences really screwed the women, okay, because they should have pursued a standalone deal with the networks, whether it's Fox and their networks, whether it's NBC and their networks, whether it's CBS, TNT, TBS, True TV, or ESPN. The next one, they got to get a standalone deal, because that's how the NCAA or the colleges, that's how they make their money, is the NCAA tournament. That funds everything, and the deeper you go in the tournament, the bigger your share of the pie is. And that is not the case for the women. And the game has never been bigger, better, more stars spread over more teams. I mean, I remember when South Carolina played Kansas State a couple of years ago, and it was Aaliyah Boston and Cory Lee. And I thought, well, they're pretty good. I never saw them becoming the number 2 ranked team in the country. You look at Iowa,
they're playing without Lee right now, which is all the more impressive. A lot of people have concerns about, because right now, you got Caitlin Clark, who's possibly in her last year. You got Angel Reese, who is possibly in her last year. And you've got these stars, that a lot of people are obviously connecting with and want to follow. And the concern is, well, they both could be gone after this year. What's it's like, guys, have you watched Juju Watkins play basketball? Have you watched Hannah Hidalgo play basketball?
That's right.
Have you watched Michaela Williams and Malaysia Fulwali play? Like, I've never been more confident in where women's college basketball is going and its future and where it is propped right now to, I think every year, I think we will see higher ratings. I think we'll see the fan bases and the readerships for us, the listeners for you, Keith. I think we'll see all of these numbers continue to go. I don't foresee the popularity or the surge of this sport slowing down anytime soon, because and we've talked about it on the men's side for a long, long time, because for a long time, right, it was Duke and North Carolina, and they seem to be the only two teams that ever win national championships. And I know in the women's game it was worse, right? It was like, oh my God, it's UConn and everybody else. Like we've gotten to the point now in this sport where you legitimately have, I'd say, 12 to 15 teams that could win the national championship this year. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. And then you just never know. I mean, because last year, again, LSU was in no one's crystal ball to win the national championship. They just got hot at the right time. I think there's other teams that could be, 4 or 5 seeds in this tournament this year that could just get hot at the right time. And next thing you know, they're crowning a 4 seed or a 5 seed as national champion. And of course, we're all initially will be shocked and our jaws are dropped. But after we have a little time, we'll go back and we'll think about it and we'll go, well, we've been saying for weeks now that 12 to 15 teams could win this thing. They were probably in that group. So, this sport right now, man, it's in a very healthy place. And I think the concerns of what it will look like, post Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and all these other stars, I think people just need to just take a breath, because this sport is not going anywhere anytime soon.
I mean, let's look at, well, it's the last year of the Pac-12, just like in football, they had their best year ever.
Yeah.
Right? Let's look at the team nobody's talking about because they lost a couple games early. Stanford, they're right back. I thought for most of the season, it was South Carolina and UCLA, and then everybody else. We've seen UCLA drop a couple of games. But, Utah, they're legit, okay? Everybody thought, oh, well, South Carolina cut me a break. He barely beat Utah, and Peely scores 37. Well, then they take down UCLA. I mean, not so fast. Colorado. The proof is in the pudding, okay? The LSU win was not a fluke. 17-3. Southern Cal with Juju Watkins, okay? 14-4 going into this week, and they've been ranked in the top 5 or 6. And look, I'm with you. She is legit. Even you look at Tennessee with Rakia Jackson, she's one of the best players in the country. Who's to say they can't ride her if the players around her? I mean, I still think Kelly Harper screws it up, but if she can get out of the way and not screw it up, they've got a chance. Angel Reese, Michaela Williams, they've got a chance. I mean, I do think, and I thought this from the beginning, I mean, you were there in Minnesota in that national semifinals. Haley Van Lith got 1 field goal attempt in the first half and was a non-factor in that game. Angel Reese went off the floor. She got an open 3 off a slow rotation. That was the only basket LSU scored in the last 4:02 of that game. Michaela Williams, who going into that game with South Carolina, and I mean, the first time I saw her, Corey, I was like, there's no way she's a guard. I mean, she's built like a tight end. Yeah. But man, can she play. And she was 45 for 90 from three, which is, or maybe it's 40 for 90, 45, 50% three-point shooter. She went 1 for 10 in that game.
Yep.
Conversely, on the other side, Pow had her worst game from three in that game. But talk about the point guard position at LSU. How much is this team missing Alexis Morris? Because to me, yes, you got Michaela Williams, you got Angel Reese, you got Anissa Morrow, who they beat South Carolina for in the transfer portal. Okay. And the Gamecock message board mob, after Mulkey wins the national championship and they get Morrow, well, Kim Mulkey's already passed South Carolina. Dawn Staley's done. Well, not so fast. Breezy Hall. It was a different player every quarter. I mean, we could talk 2 hours about that game. I'm not going to keep you, but to me, the difference, LSU, I think they really miss a player like Alexis Morris at point guard.
Yeah, no, there's no question, Keith. We've thought a lot about the last couple of weeks, especially after the Auburn loss, here in Baton Rouge and Southern Louisiana, about thinking back to the tournament run, that LSU had last year. And when things were getting a little haywire, when things were getting a little hectic, when things were getting a little dicey for LSU, there were two players that the team relied on to get them through those spots in games, get them through those stretches. And it was Alexis Morris and LaDasia Williams. Both of those, as Kim has recently have pointed out, both of them, Alexis last year was in her 6th year of college basketball. LaDasia was in her 5th year of college basketball. Obviously both didn't start their careers with Kim or at LSU, but they had been on the floor a lot, have played a lot, experienced in a lot of different systems and a lot of different situations. And those players willed the team to a national championship. I mean, the fourth quarter that Alexis Morris had in the Final Four last year, that won them the national championship. It did. And then obviously you take the defense that she played on Caitlin Clark in the title game. I mean, there's no one on LSU's roster right now that can duplicate those two just those 5 quarters of play. And when you think about it, Keith, these teams play 35, 37 games a year, and you're talking about 5 quarters of play. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, that's how razor thin the margin is between, getting to an Elite Eight or getting to a Final Four and then going on and being able to lift the trophy at the end of it all. It literally comes down to a quarter or a 2-minute stretch, or LSU doesn't have somebody on their roster right now today, as you and I are talking, that can lock in on either end of the floor and will this team to a win. I don't think they have that. Haley Van Lith wanted to play point guard. She needed that. She needed that film to make herself as marketable as possible to WNBA executives, to be able to hopefully be a W draft pick at the end of the season. And who knows if she's put what she's needed to on film yet, but she's just not a point guard.
Right.
I mean, and I think everybody can see that. I think that was known before the South Carolina game. That was known before the Auburn loss. Obviously known before the Mississippi State loss the other night. It's just not where she thrives. She thrives being in the off-ball guard. Set her an off-ball screen, let her roll off of it. She can either hit the outside shot, or she's obviously much more built to drive and finish through contact, or drive and dish to another open shooter. That's her game. The problem is, and I had this conversation with one of my colleagues on the national level just the other day. The problem is that Kim doesn't have anybody else to run traditional point. She doesn't. I like last year Poa, and I like what she brings to the team, but she can't handle the ball. And I've seen Flage's name thrown out a lot about playing point. Let's stop that. That's certainly not Flage's game. Flage is arguably the flashiest player on the court whenever she steps on it, regardless of who they're playing. And I think she's such an ooh and ah player, and it's awesome. There's not another player in the country that I enjoy watching play more than Flage Johnson. But she can be a little careless with the basketball, and that's just not who you want in the position at point guard, bringing the ball up the floor every time. Michaela Williams, I think she can do it in small stretches at a time, but she's not a traditional point guard. So there's no one on this team that can handle that load for Kim and LSU right now today. Now, if I'm Kim, what I'm doing for the next 8 SEC games, Angelica Velez, I'm sorry, baby, but you got to play. You got to play. We got to get you ready. She's the only true point guard on this team, and she's barely played this year. You got to get her some minutes. You got to get her out there. You got to get her feet wet. You got to get her wet all the way down, because that's who you're going to need experience once the SEC tournament gets here, once the NCAA tournament gets here. You're going to need that. And I know right now, with what they're fighting, you already got 3 losses in league play. You can forget about a regular season title. Forget that. It's off the table. You're not going to do it. South Carolina is not going to collapse like that. It's off the board. And you already got 2 other teams ahead of you in the standings as well. So forget that. Now it should be about making sure we're set up from a personnel standpoint to put ourselves in the best position to win come March. And I think the first and best way to do that is to get Velez on the court as early as often as possible.
I mean, I agree. So I want to get your take on South Carolina quick, and then we'll let you go because I don't want to keep you too long. But it seemed like for the Gamecocks, it was a different player every quarter. Like Chloe Kitts, she kept South Carolina in the first quarter. Malaysia Fulwiley got a quick hook, which has happened, particularly on the road. But then she comes back in and scores 8 of the last 10 points, I believe, of the first half. And I thought Cory, then the second half, Cardoso and Pow Pow kind of in the third quarter made big shots. And then it was Breezy Hall scoring 8 of her 10 points in that fourth quarter, and the 2 ginormous threes at the end. But what was it like seeing Malaysia Fulwiley, not just offensively, but defensively as well in that second quarter?
Yeah, I remember, I even recorded it with my phone, that last 30 seconds of the second quarter. LSU has a chance to hold for the final shot. Haley drives and puts up a very contested shot. The ball doesn't fall. They get the rebound, they come back down, and Malaysia hits that 3 at the buzzer. Honestly, Keith, I think that was the swing. I think that was the swing that ultimately led to South Carolina winning this game, because the complexion between LSU going in with an 8-point lead at halftime versus going in with a 5-point lead off of a buzzer beating 3
or a 10-point lead.
Exactly. Like,
right? That shot, it's 10.
Yeah.
Instead of 5.
Yeah, you're looking at somewhere between a 5 to 6 point swing just in those last 8 seconds, and that was the lift. And you could kind of feel it in the building when she hit that shot at the buzzer going into halftime. There was a very audible groan, in the crowd, outside of the couple thousand South Carolina fans that were in there. They were super excited about that, but. Yeah, what Malaysia was able to do right there before half, again, I think it turned the game, and then look, obviously being on the beat have been around, Bree Hall, for a kid like that has, in this day and age of collegiate athletics has, not only bought in, but has been trusting, of the process and of her coaching staff. You're hard pressed to be happier for kids when they come through in moments like that. At the end, the 2 big threes that she knocked down. I mean, yeah, I still firmly believe that South Carolina probably would have won the game without them. But for her to be the one to put the final punctuation on a big game like that, I mean, it's stories that, you know, in our business, it's stories that you dream about. You know, I want to write that story, you know. So I couldn't be happier for her to come through in a big moment like that. And Keith, and to your, I guess your overall point here, right? Them being able to lean on different players and different stretches of the game. I mean, that's a recipe right there. That's the recipe that I think every coach wants. It's because now you're so hard to defend. Teams can't come in, you know, these scouting reports that they get, right? I mean, you know, they could be 5 pages, they could be 50 pages. And in South Carolina's case, I think scouting reports on them have to be 50 pages because each player brings different things and they're so hard to stop in their own individual ways. Who do you stop? Do you take – and look, that's what LSU wanted to do early, right? They wanted to take Camilla out of the game, and they kind of did early. But guess what? You forgot about Chloe Kitts. Like, you know, and I thought the Chloe and Nisa matchup on Thursday was that's one of the better matchups in a like individual matchup that I've seen in a basketball game in quite some time. They were that first 12, 15 minutes of that game was really fun to watch. And I think one of the detriments to LSU, they went away from Anissa Morrow offensively. She disappeared from about halfway through the second quarter through the remainder of the game, completely disappeared. They stopped giving her looks. They stopped looking for her to score on the offensive end. And that was, I think, one thing that really hurt them in the long run was they went away from her. And, you know, obviously Chloe at that point wasn't really getting her points anymore, but, you know, you got to ride the hot sometimes.
She played less than 1 minute of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, which is crazy. I mean, why? You know, it makes no sense. And so,
well, I can tell you why. And you know, they saved Swatkins for the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
like she picked up 2 quick fouls on the road. She's still a young player, but in that fourth quarter, Dawn went with defense. I was shocked they didn't play full Wally more, but she went with her veteran. She went with Pow Pow, and Pow Pow delivered, right? She knocked down a big 3 when South Carolina was making that run. Camilla started scoring, but and Breezy Hall, you know, to me, that's the first time since the freshies were freshmen when you had Mad Kiki and Ty Harris, right, to go with them, that you didn't have to key on just 1 or 2 players. Like in 2016, when they got knocked out in the second round, it was, well, let's not let Asia Wilson or Tiffany Mitchell kill us.
right.
Okay. For the last 3 years, you know, and again, it's not always been just 1 or 2 because we saw Destiny Henderson save her best for last in that national championship game against Gino and UConn. It was, well, we got to stop Aaliyah Boston and Zia Cook.
Right.
And then she did what she did on both ends of the floor, Destiny Henderson. But this team, LSU plays 7 players, and we saw it with Del Rosario. She played 17 minutes. She was minus 20 with her on the floor. Angel Reese was the only player who was plus in the plus minus at the end. And she, you know, I think Floje, 40 minutes. Williams, 38 minutes. Morrow, 36 minutes. Angel, only 29 because of foul trouble. But Kim is falling into that Gino, well, I'm just going to play 7 players. And it's kind of like with the fouls, if you're only playing 7 players and you're really only playing 5 players, 36 minutes or more, in big games, players are going to get in foul trouble. With South Carolina, they're playing 9 players, double-digit minutes, and spreading the wealth. And I think that really helps them. I mean, in the second quarter, Dawn Staley says, okay, Camilla, you don't want to score? 0 field goal attempts in the first half of this game? Really? I'll just sit your behind down for the first 7 minutes of the second quarter. And they made a run. Cardoso scored her first basket of the half right before LSU held for the final shot.
Right.
And they're down 5 at the half. And from there, it was nip and tuck. LSU ran it back up. South Carolina brought it back down. How much was fatigue a factor late in that game, do you think?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I really believe that, I was an athlete growing up. I played, baseball and basketball and really every sport at least 1 year. If you get a pretty raucous crowd, it can mentally pull you through some of those, physical things that you may face. Right. I'm not sure if fatigue was a factor, and I think it was because of the crowd and for them to. And we forget because of how the game ended, but LSU did hit 2 big shots in the fourth quarter. They did. Haley Van Lith hit a big 3 to tie the game back up. It's at 70. And Michaela Williams hit a big shot as well there earlier, even a little bit earlier in the fourth. But I don't think they got tired. I just think South Carolina executed their game plan better, in the last 6 minutes of the game. And again, obviously everyone points to, Angel, fouling out with 4:02 left and sure. And they should. Now, Kim said she felt like she didn't put Angel back in the game too early. Cause I think she re-entered the game with about a little over 8 minutes to go, I think was, after sitting with 4, maybe one of the things you can, sort of dissect there, right. Is, well, do you let Angel come in for a minute and then sit her for a minute and then maybe you can get her in that way instead of trying to, because they were going to let her play the final 8 minutes with 4 fouls. And it's like you said, Keith, it's a hard ask, to have somebody in a very big game like that with a lot of emotion flying to, play 8 minutes of clean basketball. Especially in the post when you've got Camilla Cardoso and Chloe Kitson there and Ashley Watkins and Angel and Anissa. That's a tall ask. But I just think it came down to execution at the end, and you got to give it to Dawn in South Carolina. I think the last 4 or 5 minutes of that game, I think they just executed what they wanted to do better than LSU did.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough. I mean, there was one play where Watkins got to the rim. She caught it, faced up, went dribble and went by, and Angel had to let her go, right, because she had 4 fouls. Then in transition, with 4 fouls, you can't attempt to block that Raven Johnson layup. You got to let it go, right? And it was a big moment. Emotional moment, and I think you probably lose track because instinctively as a shot blocker you're trying to get that shot, and it turned out to be huge. So I mean, it was great for the game regardless. College basketball was the winner, but at least the fans and my listeners were happy it turned out that way. And so last question before I let you go, because I know you're an Alabama graduate. And so the GOAT, Nick Saban, who one of my dear friends, Brad Lawing, worked for at Michigan State, and they remained close up until Brad's death last summer. I mean, and even Kim alluded to this in her press conference, which I don't really think a lot of people paid close attention to. NIL, transfer portal, at a certain age, do you just want to keep grinding it out, or do you retire like Nick Saban, but just your thoughts on Nick Saban. It's a huge loss for college football and for Alabama, but I had it pegged. Like, I have been a huge Kalen DeBoer fan ever since he was at Indiana as offensive coordinator. Your thoughts on Saban, what he meant to the game, and then the task of being the guy to follow the guy, which generally never works out well.
Yeah, I don't envy Kalen at all, and I don't think many coaches do. Right? I think one of the best marks of a good coach, right, Keith, is their influence and effect on other parts of the university, and with Nick Saban, I mean, you could even go as far as the entire state of Alabama. His mark is, I mean, it's almost immeasurable. It's what he was able to do with the university's endeavor of getting to. I'll be honest, I don't exactly know what the student population is now at the University of Alabama, but I know when I was a student there, the president of the university at the time, he's like, well, we want to get to 28,000 students. Right. That's one of our main pushes. Well, Nick Saban played a huge role in that. Your athletic department and your football team is the front porch of the university, and Nick Saban coming in, and obviously in that second year, they went undefeated in the regular season, was number one going into the SEC championship game against Tim Tebow in Florida. And, although they didn't win that game, and then they went to the Sugar Bowl after a disappointing loss, they were super deflated and they lost to Utah. But,
so 38,563 currently.
Yeah.
On a quick search there.
Yeah.
And that was in 2017. So I'm sure it's more than that.
Yeah, it's got to be over 40 now. So 2006 was my freshman year, and that was when President Witt was talking about wanting to get to 28, and I think at the time Alabama was at somewhere between 23 and 24,000 students. So just then, Saban's tenure at the school, they gained 17, almost 18,000 students. And a lot of those kids are out of state, so that's obviously more intuition. So you're obviously garnering more money and look, and then obviously the city itself makes a ton of money on Saturdays in the fall when a home game's happening. There's people that go to games when they don't even have tickets, but they still go to Tuscaloosa to tailgate and obviously spend money, and buy reserve hotel rooms. Like it's the things like that I think is the wins and losses obviously are kind of the beginning of what makes a good coach, but how do they affect other parts of the business and the athletic department and the local economy? That's to me probably going to be the thing that's going to be the hardest to replace at the University of Alabama. But in terms of what he accomplished, I mean, he's got more national championships than Bear Bryant. I mean, that was something that no one ever thought was going to be accomplished and touched again, and he surpassed it. I don't necessarily think there's an argument for greatest coach ever. I think he is, and that's not me, wearing a University of Alabama, crimson sunglasses or anything. I just don't think there's an argument. I think he averaged winning like 12 games a year, which is a crazy number.
Yeah, won double-digit games every single year after his first year.
Yeah,
which was 7-6, 6-6 in the regular season, and they won a bowl game. Got beat by, was it Louisiana Monroe? I think in the first year.
Yep, my sophomore year, homecoming. I sold my ticket because I was like, I'm not going to that. Alabama will beat them by 30. That sounds boring. Like, yeah, and then ULM comes in and shocks the world. 21-14. It was crazy. So to go, and of course he made.
But after that,
yeah, he made the comment about about Pearl Harbor, and obviously had to apologize for that, and as he should have. It was not the greatest of analogies to try to make, but but yeah, to see, they played in the Independence Bowl that year, which is crazy, because that was the last time I think they had played in, any bowl game that was before like December 30th or, whatever it was, it'll be interesting to see what Kalen DeBoer does. He's obviously had success everywhere he's been. He brought some of his Washington kids down. It'll be interesting to see just kind of how he navigates recruiting, in the Southeast. It is a little bit different. But, from everything I've heard from colleagues and folks that are around the Alabama football program is that they feel good about what he's going to bring in the direction of the team. Obviously I'll be watching. I'll see how it goes. But Nick's going to be missed. I posted this the night he retired. I was like, I'm gonna miss him being the coach of my alma mater, but I'm happy that he went out on his own terms. There's a beauty in that. I'd much rather Nick retire after and let's be honest, they let Michigan off the hook. They should have won the semifinal game, should have got to another championship game. Yeah. They let Michigan off the hook, but I'd much rather Nick go out off of a semifinal loss than try to hang around and see if the magic stays and him going out after a 6-win season. I would hate that. So I'm glad he went out on his own terms.
Yeah, him and Jim Harbaugh both. Right. Yeah. I mean, different circumstance. Harbaugh getting out ahead of the posse in the National Football League. But, man, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being so generous with your time. And maybe either right before or right after that SEC tournament, I'd love to get you back on just to set the stage for that or for the NCAA tournament. Anybody that works in the Greenville News, it's always near and dear to my heart. I can remember back my dad, he was in bed every night at 8:30 because he got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. He liked his quiet time. He made his coffee. And if that newspaper wasn't hitting the driveway by 4:45, he was cussing and waking everybody up. So,
he was probably making some phone calls too, I bet.
Well, my dad hated talking on the phone, so not that. But he was making it known he was not happy that the paper guy was running late that day, for sure. But thanks so much. Thanks for everything you do covering South Carolina and now LSU. I'm always listening to Kim's media availabilities, and I'm always listening for your questions. And, outside of that one where she was coughing and talking about COVID and being a sissy and not getting a shot and all of that, she's been really good. Like, it's very insightful to listen to her because she is a great coach. She's already in the Hall of Fame. So,
sure.
She's
a tremendous quote. Yeah, man. Call me anytime, Keith. I'll be happy to join you anytime.
All right, so I'm gonna put you in the waiting room. It's probably gonna make you want to wait for like a minute to get all your stuff in. So if you could just hang in until it says you're complete, I appreciate it, and I look forward to catching up with you down the road. Be well, and thanks for all you do, and appreciate it. Great insights today from you.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you anytime.
All right. That was Cory Diaz, formerly of the Greenville News, now of the Daily Advertiser, and the only person to cover Dawn Staley and Kim Mulkey. So a lot of hoops today. Tomorrow will be football with Joe DeCamillis, his press conference, but I mean, everybody in the Nana's Porch chat box, great stuff, talking men's basketball. yeah, I'm sure there were a lot of people enjoying their favorite adult beverages when it got crunch time, and maybe enjoying them a little bit too much to try to knock the edge off. But great stuff. Appreciate everybody tuning in. On Gamecock Pod Daily tomorrow, we'll wait until after that press conference. We'll bring you the best of the Q&A from Joe DeCamillis and Shane Beamer, who will both meet with the media. And it appears South Carolina staff is set, and spring practice will be coming up soon. Gamecock men on the road Saturday at Georgia in what will be a critical road win, because, like I said, Georgia's outside of the top 75. And so if you drop that game, that's not going to be good. Ole Miss coming up, Auburn coming up, a lot. I mean, it's all ahead for South Carolina. They're not in, but they're certainly ahead of schedule in year 2. And maybe they're in the midst of a magical run with Lamont Paris. We'll see, but appreciate everybody. Appreciate Jordan Kaye and Cory for being with us today. I will be back tomorrow with the best of the Q&A, the statements from Shane Beamer and Joe DeCamillis, and we'll preview South Carolina men and women's basketball coming up this weekend. So appreciate everybody for tuning in. This will be up on Spotify for free. Get your friends to give us a listen. And go Gamecocks, and God bless. It's been Quarter Zip Wednesday on Gamecock Pod Live. I'm out of here. Have a great rest of your week.